Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, at an altitude of 35,000 feet, a United States military aircraft is flying a routine mission. Its crew does not know that at this exact moment, in a secure operations facility thousands of miles away, a data stream is being processed, cross-referenced, and transmitted. Not by an Iranian analyst, not by a Revolutionary Guard intelligence officer, but by a sophisticated orbital surveillance system that carries the fingerprints of another superpower entirely. This is not a thriller novel. This is not a war game scenario drawn up at a Pentagon think tank. According to senior defense officials, intelligence analysts, and classified assessments that have quietly begun circulating in Western security circles, this is the operational reality that American commanders in the Middle East are now being forced to plan around. The question is no longer whether Russia and Iran are sharing intelligence. That much has been established. The question, the one that will define the security architecture of the entire region for the next decade, is whether that intelligence sharing has crossed a threshold that the world does not fully appreciate yet. Whether Moscow is not merely a distant backer of Tehran's ambitions, but an active operational partner in tracking, targeting, and potentially enabling strikes against American military assets. Most news outlets covered the Russia-Iran relationship as a transactional arms deal, as a drone supply story. They reported the Shah drones being used in Ukraine and moved on. But there is a deeper architecture underneath that story, a technical and intelligence partnership that has been quietly constructed over years, accelerated dramatically since 2022, and that now appears to extend into domains that directly threaten the lives of American service members. To understand what is actually happening, you have to understand where this partnership came from. Because Russia and Iran have not always been natural allies. Their history is complicated, layered with competition and mutual suspicion stretching back centuries. Tsarist Russia and Persia fought multiple wars. Soviet Russia meddled in Iranian affairs. Even after the 1979 revolution, Iran and the Soviet Union maintained a relationship defined more by ideological friction than strategic warmth. What changed everything was the post-Cold War order, and more specifically, what both Moscow and Tehran came to see as the fundamental threat of American global dominance. By the 1990s and early 2000s, both countries shared a core strategic grievance. The United States and its allies were systematically encircling them, expanding NATO eastward toward Russia's borders, maintaining crippling sanctions on Iran's economy, and projecting military power into their immediate neighborhoods. That shared grievance became the foundation of a relationship that gradually evolved from transactional arms deals into something that now looks far more like a strategic alliance. Russia helped Iran build the Bushehr nuclear power plant, completed in 2011, giving Iran both energy capability and a foothold in nuclear technology. Russia supplied Iran with advanced air defense systems, the S-300, which transformed Iran's ability to protect its airspace from Israeli and American strikes. When the United Nations Security Council debated sanctions on Iran's nuclear program, Russia repeatedly used its veto power to weaken or block the most severe measures. And when Iran needed sophisticated guidance systems, drone technology, and electronic warfare expertise, it was Russian engineers and Russian know-how that filled the gap that Western sanctions had created. But the real acceleration came in February of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. When Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion, something remarkable happened in the geopolitics of military technology. Russia, a country that had spent decades positioning itself as a premier weapons exporter, suddenly found itself in desperate need of cheap, mass-producible drones to sustain its grinding offensive in eastern Ukraine. Iran, sitting on a stockpile of shod loitering munitions, what Western analysts called kamikaze drones, had exactly what Russia needed. The deal that followed was not merely an arms transaction. It was the opening of a deep, multi-dimensional military and intelligence relationship that both sides have been rapidly expanding ever since. Iran supplied Russia with hundreds, then thousands of Shahd drones. Russian forces used them to devastate Ukrainian power infrastructure, civilian housing, and military logistics networks. In exchange, Iran received something arguably more valuable than money. Iran received access to Russian satellite intelligence, access to Russian electronic warfare systems, access to advanced fighter jet technology, including reported negotiations for the transfer of Su-35 aircraft, and access to Russian expertise in ballistic missile guidance, the kind of precision that transforms an Iranian missile program from a regional threat into something that Western air defense planners have to take far more seriously. Now here is where this story becomes critically dangerous for American forces in the Middle East, and here is what most mainstream reporting has completely failed to connect. Russia operates one of the most sophisticated satellite reconnaissance networks on Earth. The GLONASS navigation system is the Russian equivalent of GPS, global, precise, and integrated into Russian military targeting systems. But beyond navigation, Russia's military satellite constellation includes imaging satellites, radar satellites, and signals intelligence platforms capable of tracking the movements of aircraft, naval vessels, and ground forces across vast geographic areas in near real time. These are not Cold War-era reconnaissance satellites. These are modern systems with resolution and data processing capabilities that rival anything operated by Western intelligence agencies. Now ask yourself a straightforward question. If Russia and Iran have established the kind of deep military technical cooperation that multiple intelligence assessments have now described, including cooperation on drone technology, missile guidance, electronic warfare, and air defense, why would satellite intelligence be the one domain they have chosen not to share? It wouldn't be, and according to sources with direct knowledge of classified American intelligence assessments, it isn't. What American defense officials have been grappling with, quietly, carefully, and with an urgency that the public has not been fully informed of, is evidence suggesting that Russian satellite data is being fed into Iranian targeting systems, not indirectly, not as a general intelligence exchange, but in ways that have direct operational implications for the tracking and potential targeting of American military assets, including aircraft operating over Iraq, Syria, the Persian Gulf, and the broader Middle East theater. Think about what this means in practical terms. The United States Air Force, the United States Navy, and the United States Army all operate aircraft and systems in this region. Surveillance drones, fighter jets, tanker aircraft, electronic warfare platforms, command and control assets. Each of these platforms operates with the assumption that its movements are being tracked by adversaries. That is not a secret. What changes the calculus is the quality and timeliness of that tracking. A targeting system that knows a U.S. aircraft is somewhere in a broad area is a nuisance. A targeting system that knows its precise altitude, speed, heading, and flight path in near real time, fed by a sophisticated orbital surveillance network, is something categorically different. It is an existential threat to those crews. There's also a second dimension to this that goes beyond aircraft tracking. Iran's ballistic missile program has undergone a quiet but dramatic improvement in accuracy over the past several years. When Iranian missiles struck American bases in Iraq following the killing of General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, over 100 American service members suffered traumatic brain injuries, more than the Pentagon initially acknowledged. Those missiles were accurate enough to strike specific buildings within a large base. But subsequent Iranian missile development, including the Fateh hypersonic missile revealed in 2023, suggests a trajectory of precision improvement that Iranian domestic capability alone does not fully explain. Ballistic missile accuracy depends on three things: guidance systems, real-time positional correction, and targeting data quality. Russia has world-class expertise in all three. The combination of Russian technical assistance and Russian satellite data feeding into Iranian systems represents a force multiplier that transforms Iran's already formidable missile arsenal into something that American commanders have to plan against with much greater seriousness. And then there is the electronic warfare dimension, perhaps the least reported but most strategically significant element of this partnership. Russia has spent years developing some of the world's most advanced electronic warfare capabilities. The ability to jam communications, spoof GPS signals, interfere with radar systems, and blind enemy sensors is a central pillar of Russian military doctrine. In the early phases of the Ukraine war, Russian electronic warfare systems degraded Ukrainian communications and navigation capabilities significantly. Iran has been an eager student of these techniques, and Russian advisors embedded with Iranian forces. A presence confirmed in multiple intelligence assessments, have been directly involved in training Iranian personnel on electronic warfare systems. An aircraft that has had its GPS spoofed does not know it is being navigated off course. A radar system that has been jammed does not know it has been blinded. Electronic warfare is invisible until it is too late. And an Iran equipped with Russian electronic warfare doctrine and potentially Russian electronic warfare hardware represents a threat to American aircraft operations that is qualitatively different from anything the region has seen before. If you are finding this analysis valuable, now is the moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The stories that matter most are never the loudest ones in your feed, and this channel exists to dig beneath the surface of what you are being told. The global reaction to this emerging threat has been notably muted, and that muted reaction is itself revealing. The United States government has publicly condemned the Russia-Iran drone deal. American officials have called out Russian use of Iranian-shod drones in Ukraine in strong terms. Sanctions have been levied on Iranian entities involved in drone production. But on the satellite intelligence question, on the question of whether Moscow is actively feeding targeting data to Tehran, official Washington has maintained a careful, deliberate silence. That silence is strategic. There are several reasons for it. Publicly acknowledging that Russian satellite data may be helping Iran track American military aircraft would create immediate pressure for a military response. Pressure that the Biden administration, and now the current administration, has consistently sought to avoid. It would also require the United States government to explain, in public, exactly how it knows what it knows, which would compromise the intelligence sources and methods that revealed the cooperation in the first place. And it would force a direct confrontation with Moscow at a moment when the United States is simultaneously managing the Ukraine war, the Taiwan Strait, and a Middle East on the edge of wider conflict. Israel, for its part, has been watching this partnership with focused intensity and mounting alarm. Israeli intelligence, arguably the most informed in the world on Iranian capabilities, has consistently assessed the Russia-Iran military relationship as a serious strategic threat, not merely to Israel, but to the entire Western position in the Middle East. Israeli officials have quietly communicated to Washington that they view Russian technical assistance to Iran as a red line issue, one that will eventually force a direct Israeli response regardless of American preferences for restraint. Europe has largely treated the Russia-Iran partnership as a Ukraine problem, focused on the drone supply chain and its implications for the war in Eastern Europe, without fully reckoning with the Middle Eastern dimension. That analytical blind spot is significant, because the same industrial and intelligence cooperation that produces drones for Russian use in Ukraine is simultaneously developing Iranian capabilities that directly threaten European energy infrastructure, European shipping lanes through the Red Sea and the Gulf, and European security interests across the broader Mediterranean and Middle Eastern theater. China watches all of this with its characteristic patience and long-term calculus. Beijing has its own deep economic interests in Iran, as the largest buyer of Iranian oil and as a strategic partner in the Belt and Road framework. China has no interest in a catastrophic Middle Eastern war that destabilizes global energy markets. But China also has no interest in Washington successfully managing this threat, containing both Russia and Iran, and re-establishing American strategic dominance in the region. The quiet Chinese posture, neither condemning the Russia-Iran partnership nor actively encouraging further escalation, is precisely calibrated to let the situation develop while preserving Beijing's options. Now let us be direct about where this is heading, because there are three distinct trajectories available from this moment, and they differ from each other in ways that matter enormously for what the next year looks like. In the most favorable scenario, the one that requires the greatest combination of diplomatic skill, intelligence leverage, and strategic luck, the United States and its allies succeed in fracturing the Russia-Iran partnership at its most dangerous seams. The mechanism here is not military. It is economic and technological. Additional sanctions targeting the specific entities and individuals involved in satellite data sharing and missile guidance cooperation, combined with increased Western military aid to Ukraine that raises the cost too. Russia of maintaining its relationship with Tehran could create enough pressure to force Moscow into a more cautious posture. Iran, facing its own economic strangulation and domestic unrest, might recalculate whether the depth of its Russian partnership is worth the escalating Western response. This scenario is possible, but it requires sustained political will across multiple Western governments at a moment when those governments are exhausted, divided, and domestically distracted. The most likely scenario, the one that emerges from a cold-eyed reading of current trends, is managed escalation. Neither full-scale war nor genuine de-escalation, but a grinding intensification of the shadow conflict in which Russian satellite intelligence continues to enhance Iranian capabilities. American forces in the region operate under increasingly sophisticated threats, and the probability of a serious incident, a shoot-down, a missile strike that kills American personnel, a confrontation that spirals beyond the intentions of either party, rises incrementally with each passing month. This is the scenario that keeps American military planners awake at night. Not a dramatic explosion, but a slow accumulation of capability and risk that eventually produces a catastrophic outcome neither side fully intended. And then there is the scenario that nobody in official Washington wants to say out loud. If Russian satellite intelligence is confirmed to have directly enabled an Iranian strike that kills American service members, the political pressure on any sitting American president to respond not just against Iran, but against the source of that targeting data, against Russia itself, would be immense, possibly uncontrollable. The United States would face a choice between absorbing the loss without a full accounting, which would be politically and strategically devastating, or escalating in a direction that brings two nuclear powers into direct military confrontation. This is the scenario that the architects of the Russia-Iran partnership, the ones who understand precisely what they have constructed, are counting on American reluctance to prevent them from continuing to build. This is why the next few weeks and months are not merely important. They are potentially definitive. The decisions being made right now about how to respond to Russian satellite sharing with Iran, about whether to publicly name and confront that. Cooperation, about whether to strike the financial and technical networks that enable it. These decisions will determine whether the shadow war between Iran and the United States remains a shadow war, or whether it emerges into something that the world has not seen since the worst moments of the Cold War. We are living inside one of those moments where the choices made quietly, in classified briefings and closed-door strategy sessions, by people whose names never appear in newspapers, determine the arc of history for a generation. And here is the truth that every viewer of this documentary needs to sit with. The information gap between what official governments know about the Russia-Iran satellite intelligence partnership and what the public has been told is not accidental. It is deliberate. Governments have reasons, some legitimate, some self-serving, for managing what citizens understand about the threats being built in real time against their military personnel and their national interests. The role of journalism, of documentary investigation, of analytical media that refuses to accept the official framing as the complete picture, has never been more important. Because an informed public is the one force that governments cannot ultimately manage. An informed public demands accountability. An informed public understands the stakes. An informed public does not allow its leaders to drift into catastrophic conflicts through silence, incrementalism, and the comfortable assumption that things will not get worse. So here is your question for the comments section, and I want to hear your genuine, considered answer. If it is confirmed, definitively, publicly, that Russian satellites are being used to help Iran target American military aircraft, what do you believe the United States' response should be? Military? Diplomatic? Economic? And do you believe the world is actually prepared for where this partnership leads if it is not confronted now? Drop your answer below. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening. And stay with this channel because the story we told you today is not the end of this investigation. It is the beginning.